Hello, I'm Tiffany, creator of Red Petal Patterns, and this is Knitting Basics for Beginners. And today I want to talk about increases. Increases are when you add stitches to your work. So you start off with 20 stitches, you need to increase each side of the row, and that will end up with 22 stitches. So you're going to add an increase on one side and you're going to add an increase on another. Every time it says to increase, they generally mean add one stitch. Otherwise, it will say increase 2 stitches at the beginning of the round, or increase 2 stitches at the end of the next 2 rows. There are many ways to do increases. The one I'm going to show you first is the one that I first learned. It is the default that I usually go to when I'm not thinking about it too hard. And it is called knit front back. It is also called knit back front. And I will tell you the difference between those two. Like I said, this is my default. If I need to increase and it doesn't say particularly any type and I don't see a reason why, like if it's the edge of a sleeve, I started from the cuff and I'm working up and I need that sleeve to get bigger as it gets longer. And it's going to be at the seam anyway, and it's going to be hidden. It's going to get sewn in, and nobody's ever going to see it. There's no point in putting myself out on remembering how to do left and right leaning and hiding invisibly. There's no point in thinking about it. I can just follow my default when nobody's going to see it anyway. And this is called knit front back. It is also alternatively called knit back front. And you can see on this, you can see it's not completely invisible, but it's not really ugly either. Nothing really stands out or sticks out. And generally, you're not going to have increases this close together. They're going to be spaced out a little, 4 to 8 rounds or rows before you'll do it again. So they're going to be a good inch apart usually. And this just kind of disappears a little. You see how it causes these to lean this way, straight in the center, and these lean this direction. And that is because of adding the stitches on top of each other in the same spot. So you generally don't want to decrease right next to each other, but you can increase right next to each other. Generally, you're going to have 1, 2, 3. You're going to have a certain amount of stitches in between your increases. And in this case, I have 2 stitches in between the increases, but the way I did the increase, it turns out looking like 3. And those will stay straight. I put an increase here and I line those increases on top of each other, which forces the new ones out this way like a wedge. And that's why you have that column on either side where you can see the directional change. The directional change will always happen when you have a stack of increases in the same place. If you don't want to see that directional change, you would change your increases to different spots throughout your work. That happens a lot when you work a sweater from the top down and it's a round yoke and you don't want to see the increases. As you work down, you'll put increases, here, 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 and then a couple inches down you'll put it here and here, and then a couple inches down you'll put it over here and over here, and you stagger them out so they don't line up on top of each other and cause this diagonal movement. The other way to do increases, and these were in the body of the work, the other way to do increases is on the edge. And you'll see this a lot on especially sleeves. They will just tack on an extra stitch towards the end. Nobody's going to see it. You're going to sew it in. It's not a big deal. So these increases are seen. It's part of the design. If you were doing a raglan sweater, you would have these at the shoulder seams. You would see it on a one-piece sweater that wanted to get bigger as it went out. So it's bigger at the hips than it is at the waist. You would get these directional darts. Hats often have these directional increases. If you start from the center top and work your way out, you'll have directional increases. Baby bonnets, things like that. And now I'm going to show you the difference in how to do these. I'm going to show you the knit front back, and then I'm going to show you the knit back front. I personally do not really see a difference, but it will make a difference in where it sits on the middle of the work. It won't make a difference on the edge at all. But if you were in the body of your fabric, you may want to reverse what you did so that you only have those 2 stitches instead of those 3. In the long run, it's not really going to be the end of the world one way or the other. It's more important that you understand how many stitches you have. Don't drop your stitches, don't twist them, and get the overall shape. Your shapings do not have to be perfect when you first start out. So I'm going to show you how to increase on the edge, and this is, I'm going to go in, going to work this stitch, and then I'm going to do my increase on the next stitch, and I'm going to work, and it's called knit front back. Personally, I end up knitting back and then front because I knit with the back loop first. That's just how I knit. If your stitch is the other way, you're really doing whichever leg goes first like you normally would. So if you normally knit in the front, then you're going to do this increase front and then back. If you normally knit in the back, then you're going to do back then front. So mine is technically back then front. So I'm going to try to get this to focus. And this is how this is worked. Sometimes it will say knit two in the same stitch. It's almost the same thing, and I'll show you the difference. So I'm going to go in the back, make my stitch, and instead of popping it off, I'm now going to go in the other leg and knit that stitch. Now I have made a knit in the back loop and knit in the front loop, all in one stitch. When I come back around, I'm going to purl that stitch like it's any other stitch, and it will just create one more stitch in my work right there. And let me show you what that looks like if you knit the other direction. So this is knit front, make my stitch, and now I'm going to twist around and go in that back loop back there. So I will hold the front loop out of the way and go in that back loop and make a stitch. And now I have 2 stitches out of that one. This is the same thing. It does not matter if you go front, back, back, front. It really doesn't matter. But you will have this little tiny purl bump there. So in the body of your work, you'll see there, 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 and there. There'll be a little tiny purl prick. It's minor. If you want your increases to be completely invisible, stick around. We'll be doing that also. But this does leave a little tiny hatch mark where you did it. But it's more invisible than a yarn over would be. Again, back, make a stitch, front. So there is a little bit of a twisting action there, and that stitch will actually be twisted. Front. And if you do it the other way, you're going to go front, yarn over, pull up your stitch, then back, yarn over. And either way is going to look identical on the needle and in your work. But there would be a slight difference in how much spacing is between the stitches and the little hatch mark. So you'd want to make sure whichever way you do it, it's consistent and that you're doing it on top. You're doing it in the correct spot every time so that it's consistent, because otherwise you'd have a hatch mark over here and a hatch mark over here and a hatch mark over here and a hatch mark over here. And that would be more noticeable than a straight line. When you are working from the edge, which I just showed you that, you can go one stitch in and then work your increase, and you would get to the end, and this is, you would work to the last two stitches and you'd work your increase in this stitch and then you work your last stitch. The reason you do that is because you want to keep a clean edge, a selvage stitch at the end. Now that stitch could be part of a I-cord, which is complicated and we're not going there now. It could be part of a knit every row, so a garter stitch. It could be part of a purl stitch. You can do the edging where you slip the beginning of every row and knit the end, and when you turn it around, you would slip and then purl the end. So it gets slipped every other row, and that makes a clean edge. If you're going to be sewing this edge, doesn't matter. It'll be hidden. Nobody will ever see it. Don't worry about how clean it is. You can hide it in the seams. Eventually, you're going to want to make nice, clean selvage edges, but in the beginning, will not matter. Nobody's going to see it but you. It just makes it easier if it's clean so that you don't get loose stitches and holes and what have you. But it's more important that you finish the piece than it is that you make it perfect. So worry about the things that are going to show. Don't worry about the things that aren't going to show. Selvage edges in a seam are not going to show. Okay, now that I've cleared that up. When you want to work these in the middle, you're going to do the exact same thing that you did on the edge, except you want to make sure that you maintain a space. So in this one, it would be, I'm going to work to one stitch before the marker, or two stitches before the marker, pardon me. I'm going to work to two stitches before the marker, increase, then work the one stitch on the side of the marker. Then I would do one stitch on this side of the marker, increase. And if I wanted to be very particular about it, I would have turned the stitch around to do the opposite of what I did on this side, so that I had just the two stitches in the middle. Because now my little tick mark is going to be two stitches over, and I'll have three stitches in the middle. If I did it this way, where I worked my one stitch and I want my tick mark between the one stitch and the next stitch, then I will turn my hook around, stitch. I'll turn my stitch around and I will work it the other way so that my tick mark is on that side. Did I just do the exact same thing? I did. Okay. Now you want to do, that is knit front back. There is also knit and purl in the same stitch, and that is going to be exactly what you think it is. you're going to knit your stitch, bring the yarn between the needles, and purl in the other leg, or loop, however you want to call it. And that will look just like the knit front back. See how the purl? They will look exactly the same. Let me show you that one more time. So you're going to, in the leg that wants to go first, you're going to knit in the first one and purl in the second one. Now, let me reverse that and purl in the first one and knit in the second one. And that put your bump on the other side. So this one has your bump to the left, this one has your bump to the right, because you purled, then knit, so your purl bump's going to be first. These are both very easy to do, standard, ordinary, beginner increases. They can take place of pretty much any other increase that you see. It's okay to be comfortable with just this one. And you can see that you can move your bumps around. You can knit in both. You can knit in both loops, or you can knit and purl. It will give the same outcome. Whichever one you're more comfortable with, understanding where that tick mark's going to be. And then I'm going to show you one more little fun thing that you can do with these increases. So going off of the knit and purl and understanding twisted stitches and such. So go in and knit, bring your yarn forward, purl, bring your yarn back, knit, bring your yarn forward and purl. You can stop, turn it around, knit these 4 stitches you just made in one stitch, knit again, purl again. So you did your increases, purled, knit, purl. Then knit 2 together, knit 2 together. So decrease, decrease. Purl those 2 that you just made. And then knit those 2 together. And then go across. And you just made a bobble. Usually the bobbles, I think, are made with 3 stitches instead of 4. But how fun is that to put a little bobble in? And it's so easy, especially if you learn how to knit back the other direction without turning. It is so easy to go in and 1, 2, 3, and then purl, and then knit, purl, knit all 3 together, and you've got just this cute little bobble button thingy on your sweater. So if you were doing a baby sweater, this makes the most adorable little button. Instead of putting a button in, you work your buttonhole and then work all the way across, and on the same row do a little bobble. Or if you're doing the buttonholes on the left, then you would do your little bobble on a buttonhole roll. You do your little bobble, go across, do your little buttonhole, and this becomes the button instead of sewing buttons on. And then you don't have to worry about buttons popping off. And how adorable is that little bobble in there? I'm sorry, I've gone off on a tangent, but that is